So I have here 2 batches of fry. On the left I've got some Danios, and on the right some Corydoras. And I have got to get them prepared to stay fed and stay alive while I go out of town. Now both of these are at an age where I think they could survive some time without food. The Danios I'd be a little more worried about. The Corydoras, they could probably go a couple of days. But in this particular instance, I'm going to be gone for 3 solid days. And if I don't find some way to keep them fed, I think I'm probably going to lose some of the Danios. And while the Corydoras, I don't think any would die off while I'm gone, but I do think some would become stunted. So I'm going to show you what I have planned to try to take care of them while I'm gone. The Danios I think are actually going to be the easier of the 2. For these I'm going to use the system of peristaltic autodosers that I've showed you before. If you haven't seen this before, I'll show you how this works. I've got a 2-head peristaltic pump here, and it is connected to a culture of paramecium here next to it, and then a fresh supply of clean water kind of behind these tanks here. And how this works is when the peristaltic pump runs, there we go, it is drawing paramecium out of the culture, dispensing it for the fry, and now I have it at the same time withdrawing water from the clean water supply to keep the culture container full so it doesn't drain. And this is slightly different than you've seen before if you've seen my other video on this. I wanted to tell you why I'm using a different pump now. So this pump that you see is cheap, simple, doesn't come with its own capacity to time and scheduled dosing. This is just power pump runs, but it does have a rate adjustment on it. So the first one I ever used was this one right here. This is one of the J-bow pumps, and this is pretty good. It's solid. I wouldn't recommend it against it, certainly not, but it is kind of a pain to set the programming for the scheduled dosing. I mean, it's not awful, but the thing that really has been bugging me about it is that if this loses power, if it's unplugged, it forgets its programming and you have to reset it. And while it's not the worst process to set the feedings on a schedule, it does take some time, and so if you want to adjust the volume or the frequency, it does take some time. It's a little bit inconvenient. I have another pump here, and I think this is made for nice saltwater systems. This actually controls 4 more pump heads on a separate unit. This is a really nice piece of equipment. I picked this up at a swap meet for way less than it's worth, and it's cool, and it remembers its timing settings after it's unplugged, but once you hit a certain volume of water that you want to dispense with it, you lose the ability to pick what time of day you want that to happen. So it just kind of takes the volume of water you want to dispense and it spreads it out evenly over a 24-hour period, and that's not ideal. I've even been playing with one of these, I don't know how to say it, Camaware, one of the two. This is a really nice pump, more used on the saltwater side, but quality-wise this is really good. And it's Bluetooth, app controlled, and that's great, but it's just one head. Their multi-head units are super expensive, and even though the app makes it pretty easy to reprogram, it's still a little bit of a headache. So that brings me to this. Why this? This one just powers on, and the pumps run as soon as it's powered. So what I've chosen to do is, instead of trying to use something with its own scheduling function, I am just using Casa Wi-Fi timers. Okay, so that's another app-controlled system you can see on the phone here. You can just create as many power on, power off cycles as you want, down to 1-minute increments. So this is really easy to schedule, very easy to adjust, and very easy to just manually on-off. Okay, and the one challenge to this is you have to have an adjustable rate flow on the peristaltic pump, because you can only go as low as a 1-minute cycle powered on through the Casa timer. But still, I've been trying this out for a few weeks, and I think I like this better. So from past experience, I can say pretty confidently that one of these cultures, freshly dense with paramecium, is going to have no problem keeping the Danios alive for the whole trip, which for me is going to be 3 days. But Corydoras, what am I going to do for them? So I have been stretching and thinking, how else can I use this peristaltic concept to feed other things to other animals? And this last week, I started trying to see if I could make that work with brine shrimp. So let me swing something over here. Okay, so here's what I've got in mind for the Corydoras. Let me open this up so you can see what's inside. Okay, so we've got another peristaltic pump in the back, this one just with one head. Got a bottle here of hatched brine shrimp. And the idea is I'm going to dose this through this little tube out the bottom here into the tray so that the Corydoras can eat it. So what else is going on here? Well, for one, this is actually a small refrigerator. I think it's piezoelectric or some technology like that. It's about 45 bucks. Not very big. It's for makeup or a few cans of soda, something like that. But that is able to keep the brine shrimp in here down at about 36 degrees. So they're pretty well preserved. So I just drilled some holes through, key points here, out the bottom, in through the side to get power for the pump and also air supply. Because you need something to keep the brine shrimp moving around in here so that samples drawn from it are fairly homogeneous in concentration. So this is controlled the same way with one of the Casa timers. Let me show you what that looks like. And again, with the push of a button or on a schedule, pump turns on. There you go. You can see the brine shrimp falling down into the water where the Corys will get them. And again, with the Casa timer, this can only run in 1 minute increments, so it's important to kind of dial in either the density of the brine shrimp in that bottle of water or control the flow rate just right so it's not an overwhelming amount of food, but enough that everybody's staying fed. So this week I've been kind of calibrating and figuring out how to do that right. Number of feedings per day also could help control that. Okay, so it works pretty well at dispensing the brine shrimp, and if you're like me, you might be looking at this for the first time and having a moment of, oh my god, I think I just found the answer. And maybe. I'm pretty impressed with how this works so far. So what else is cool about this? Well, for one, the longevity of the brine shrimp inside of this container has really impressed me. I should mention, the water in there is actually fresh water. I already put them through a brine shrimp sieve, separated them out from the salt water, rinsed them, and that is pure fresh water. It was also chlorinated when I put it in there. I thought, with the shrimp going into a refrigerator, there's no way they're going to stay alive, so I didn't really take any extra steps to preserve them. But yeah, I don't want that much salt water dispensing into a small space with freshwater fish, so it had to be fresh. And what's really surprised me about it is actually the brine shrimp in there, as long as they stay circulating like this, they can stay alive. These are actually still alive. Just barely, but they're still alive, and I'm now close to 48 hours from when I pulled them out of the hatchery. So I was not expecting that at 36 degrees Fahrenheit. But in terms of top-end longevity, so far it seems like I can get about 3 days before they start breaking down, and I think I can do better. I mean, it's not like the water gets cloudy. If you've had a brine shrimp hatchery with the batch going for too long, you probably know what this looks like, but it gets cloudy. The water gets cloudy as they start to break down. And even after 3 full days, the water's not cloudy, but I do notice up at the top there's a little bit of orange foam. And the shrimp look intact, but there's orange foam, and to me that's just a pretty clear sign that they're starting to break down. So here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do to improve this and keep them fresh and intact for 3, maybe 4 days. What I think I'm going to do is kill the air, because it's that churning inside of the container over time, for days on end, that I think is actually doing the damage and breaking them down. So if I kill the air and have it powered by a pump that's on the same timer as the pump, I can let them settle and be well preserved and not physically chewed up for the full 59 minutes between each cycle. Now that's going to, the brine shrimp are going to die faster, right? If they're not circulating, if they pile up on the bottom, they're going to die off. But I'm not sure there's that much of an advantage. I mean, the Corys are going to eat them either way. They're still very fresh, and I think that the longevity over multiple days in this particular application is going to be worth more than them staying alive for the first 2 days. If I was using this for a shorter trip and for maybe mid-water feeding fish that would benefit more from them, from the shrimp being alive and moving around, maybe I would more prioritize keeping them circulating. Okay, what else? This is kind of a bulky contraption, and it is right next to the tank. I don't love that. It's taking up space here, but there's a reason for it. I did not want the cord length, the tubing length, to be very long because it's going to be out of refrigeration. So I don't want a foot or 2 feet of tubing with brine shrimp in it that are just expiring in there and fouling up the water inside of that tube length. So I figure the shorter the tube, the better. I mean, the water in here is probably still staying fairly cold from the refrigeration. That's my hope anyway. So I've got a few days until I gotta go. I'm gonna keep trying to fine-tune the concentration, the number of feedings, and see if I can get this fairly optimized by the time I have to go. But either way, I think this is gonna take care of them while I'm gone. So I'm optimistic. Let's see. Okay, so I think I've solved my air control problem to the bottle of brine shrimp in there. You can see they're all settled to the bottom. What I did is I disconnected the air from my recently built central air loop, which feels really silly to do, and I replaced it with this tiny little pump I got from Amazon. Very low powered, but it doesn't take much. And then I gave it a little pressure let-off valve here, because it's too much pressure if it's not restricted to some degree. And this is working pretty well. So, shrimp are on the bottom, and I have the air pump powered by the same timer as the peristaltic pump. Alright. Zoom in just a bit here. Now if I hit the on button on the timer, see it's starting to pick up and circulate the brine shrimp around as the peristaltic is pulling them into its lines. So I've been trying this for the last about 2 days, and while the degradation of the shrimp was never that noticeable, I think it's less so now. I do think this is going to do what I was hoping it'll do, keep them fresh for a few days. Okay, so I'm T-minus 2 days from taking off on my trip, and I'm feeling pretty prepared. I'm feeling secure in that these fry are going to get food while I'm gone, and as I've been watching them over the last week, I'm kind of getting the sense that these are growing faster than I'm used to, which shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, they're getting fed 17 times a day. That's ridiculous. And ordinarily, when you see the fry several times a day, every day, you get blind to change and you don't notice dramatic increases in their size. It's almost imperceptible day over day. But these seem more like every time I come back and look at them, they're a little bit bigger. So I'm pretty impressed with this, and I'm starting to think to myself, this might not be just a travel solution. I'm probably just going to do this all the time. And that's already what I'm doing with the paramecium auto feeding. I use that pretty much every time I get an opportunity. And these two, actually, I'm noticing a better growth rate than I have in the past, even when using the peristaltic. And I'm owing that to just the sheer number of feedings per day that you can set up conveniently with the separately scheduled pump rather than internally scheduled. I don't think the last pump I used was capable of doing 17 a day. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is as dialed as I'm going to get it, so I'm going to refill the containers before I go, but otherwise we'll leave the rest up to fate and some serious nerd power here. So I'll check back in when I get back, and we'll see how it worked. And I'm back. I spent the weekend in Portland hanging out with their aquarium society, talking about breeding fish, and it was a good time. Met some really cool people, went to the wet spot. I brought home way too many fish, and I think gave TSA something to talk about at the next staff meeting. And I was very pleased to find that all the fry are doing just fine. To be fair, I already knew that. That wasn't a shock. I was periodically checking in on them with a handy security camera feed and periodically turning on the feeders just so I could see they were still working. But I am happy to see that the really impressive growth rate has continued. I actually got back a couple of nights ago and just left this set up like I had it to see how long I could push this. And as you can see here, we're almost out of water in brine shrimp, but It's nice and clear, no clouding, doesn't look like they've broken down, and they are still feeding effectively today. So that's 5 days from when this was filled up. And the Danios over here, they're doing fine too. No losses, which is great. Those were the ones I was a little more worried about. And they've put on some pretty good size too in the last week. I noticed today the fry, they're getting larger and a little more savvy. They're starting to bunch up under the feeder. Let me see if I can show you. When I turn this on, they all kind of cram over there. And that's cool. They're getting bigger, stronger, more aware. But this also tends to be the point where the larger ones really pull ahead, and any that are a little bit behind in size, they start to struggle a little bit. So I think this is why when devising a method to feed a small fry like this, you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot by having the food trickle in at too low of a rate, because larger and stronger fry are right there waiting to gobble it all up, and it doesn't leave much left over for the smaller ones. So it just feels that way to me, that you kind of have to flood the space, not necessarily overfeeding, but delivering the right amount of food in a short period of time so that the smaller ones aren't completely deprived. So like I said, I'm pretty happy with this, but there's no way I'm not going to keep working on it. My mind's been spinning all week actually on ways to make this bigger, better, maybe put more distance between the reservoir of food and the fry themselves. So yeah, I'm sure I'm going to come up with some different permutations of this. It's been a pretty busy summer for me. I've been doing a bit of travel, going to visit other fish clubs, and also rebuilding just about all of my fish keeping equipment, like these setups you see here. It's been a lot of work, and I think it's just about done. It's looking pretty good, so more good things to come. I'll see you again in another 6 months. Just kidding. Maybe.